Welcome to another episode of My Wakeup Call. You know what this podcast is about, or maybe you don't if you haven't listened to it before, but I'll tell you what it's about, whether you're new or you're a follower and subscriber. My Wakeup Call is a podcast where I meet people and they have me at hello, and I want much more because I want to introduce them to you, my listener, because these people need to make the world better. They don't mind making $1. I could learn from all of them in that category, but they have to make a difference. It's just in them. And we find out how they got to that. So let me tell you about Finnian Kelly. Oh, love the name. Love his accent. He's a world-renowned keynote speaker on intentionality. He's a retreat facilitator, a one-on-one executive coach. He's been dubbed the business mystic and is the creator of intentionality.com. Write that down. It has too many syllables for me. Intentionality.com. And it's a framework he uses to guide people to be purposeful and aligned in their beliefs, their thoughts, and behaviors so they can feel more love in their lives. And my guess is bring more love to their lives. And I'll bet the love actually overflows to other people. He's an entrepreneur. He's built and exited 2 multi-million-dollar companies in the financial industry. He's the creator and chief visionary officer of intentionality.com. So that probably means he's bringing in other people to run it better than he could. He's a retreat facilitator. He does all kinds of stuff. And he joins us now. Finnian, lay that accent on us.
Well, Mark, that was such a wonderful introduction, and I'm really looking forward to this podcast because I know you're going to take me to places that I may not have even been before.
Yeah, but I promise to bring you back. Although some of the people on reviews say, "Oh, Mark brings his guests to a real place, and sometimes he brings them back, sometimes he doesn't." But we'll see. But we won't get into trouble. Like I'm a suicide prevention specialist, so if we go way out on a limb, I'll pull you back. So, Finnian, what do you think if you take a view of your life, and every now and then, if you're in the corporate world, I say, give me a 30,000 foot view. But if you're someone like Finnian, I think 10,000 feet is enough. So if you look at your life and your life path, what do you think you've been called on to do? What's your purpose? And if we made a bet today, you think, I still think it's going to be my purpose when I get as old as you, Mark.
Okay, Mark, I feel confident now in my purpose. It's evolved over time, but if I looked at my life, it can all be summed up in that one word, intentionality. So I define my purpose as to embody intentionality, to connect to my true nature and inspire others to do the same. And through me living and breathing this life of intentionality and lifting up my field, then my field can interact with other people's fields and bring more peace and joy and love into their lives as well, which is really exciting because for a long time there, I was always seeking and searching and I was doing lots of different things. And it now feels like, it's almost like, it all makes sense. It feels great.
So you got to unpack that last couple sentences. I was searching, I was reaching, I wasn't finding it. And then I found it. So share with us some of the stories and the wake-up calls along the way, and let us get to know you.
Okay. So if I would have to, let's start with the wake-up call. I was 4 years ago, nearly to the day, I was sitting in a mansion in Beaver Creek, Colorado, in a ski resort. I was skiing 100 days a year. I had sold a financial business. I was married to a woman I loved so much. I was living a really great life. And then suddenly my wife and I separated. And that was an incredible wake-up call because I just never thought that would happen. I thought we were in it together. We were in it for life. And it was very, very confronting. And in that moment, I had to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of seeking inside, getting in to know myself and going, what has contributed to this moment? I've been very intentional my whole life. I actually was living my vision for my life. I had achieved it at that exact moment. I achieved what I wanted for my life. And and this happened. Now that's a confronting moment. And what I had to do was look at, rather than playing the victim, I saw two paths. There was a path of playing the victim and distracting myself, or there was a path of exploration and owning exactly where I was at, and realizing that I'm a creator of my life, and some things have happened, have contributed to this moment. And even though that was a lot more confronting and a lot more challenging, I knew the long-term benefits of it would outweigh the other path. So I went on a deep exploration, and really it's been a 4-year journey to get to where I'm at right now. And I was sharing just before, the state that I'm feeling right now is something which I've been wanting since I was a little boy, something I didn't know that I was actually looking for, but now I've got it. It's what I actually had wanted, which is peace, that beautiful thing, just peace inside of myself. And that's what I'm committed to keeping. That's what I really want. And where that comes from is having a deep understanding of who you are, what's important to you, what are your values, what drives you, and then also just letting go of so much pain and so much trauma. And what has happened to me is I've realized my trauma is my medicine. It's my gift. It's now that I've actually gone through my life and I've experienced these different elements, and I've actually processed it, I can connect with others so much better, and I can give this to people, and I can be the light which shines in their life, which is the greatest privilege. There's nothing better than I can imagine with your work, when you can directly impact, whether it's just one person, and you can help them have a better life. It's the greatest gift for myself ever.
And how old were you? What, as a child, did you say 4?
So I'm 36 years old now. Really my big moment where everything split into my life was 10 years old. There was a lot of different events before that, but there was a memorable moment when I was 10 where I felt myself split into different parts. And really that set off a chain of events where I went on 20 years of creating this version of Finn that I wanted, thinking that it would help me. And then the wake up moment 4 years ago was, all right.
So I want to try something. Are you game?
Yeah, I'm definitely game.
I want you to picture your 10-year-old self. And without editing it, what's the expression on his face when I say picture your 10-year-old self?
He was confused and sad and feeling abandoned.
So I want you to imagine going back to that 10-year-old self, feeling those things. And he looks up at you and he says, "Why did you run away from me and stay away for so long?" And imagine he's asking you that. And he's glad that you found peace because you've been gone a long time. So if he were to ask you that, and you look into his face, and he doesn't even know he's going to make it, and you're proof that he made it. But if you can imagine he's looking up at you, and he said, "Why did you run to get away from me? And why did it take you so long to come back?" What would you say?
Because I didn't know how to take care of you. And I was looking for a solution. And I realized the solution was just to always be with you.
And I want you to imagine looking at you, and he's not quite ready to believe because he doesn't really trust anyone. And imagine him looking up at you saying, "Why should I believe you?" What would you say?
Because I am you, I get you, I love you, and I'm never going anywhere ever again. You've always been here, and I've always been here. And now we can do life together really wonderfully.
And I want you to imagine he looks up at you and he's looking into your eyes like with a lie detector test on steroids. And he looks into your eyes and he says, "Do you promise?"
I promise. You're safe. And I'm never going to leave you. I'm not going anywhere.
Now, I want you to imagine that you're hugging your 10-year-old self. And he's hugging you. And I want you to imagine that the DNA from where you are now fuses with his DNA. And now I'd like you to imagine being your 10-year-old self, hugging you as an adult. And I want you to imagine feeling the DNA of hope coming into you. You're 10 years old. You don't know what to hold on to. And I want you to imagine taking some breaths, because hope was something he really didn't have a lot of. So can you imagine being that 10-year-old self?
Yes.
And with each breath, can you imagine he's feeling more hopeful?
Yes.
And before we get back to this podcast, as opposed to this therapy session, I want you to imagine being that 10-year-old looking up at you and saying, "You promise you'll never leave. Now switch back to being you," looking him in the eyes. And you're crying with love for this kid who is so lovable. You're filled up with emotion for the pain and confusion, and he didn't know if he was going to make it through. And you say to that 10-year-old self from where you are now, and you say, "Believe me when I say this, because you won't even understand it because you're 10. It is my intention to never leave you. And I promise." So feel that connection, and then you can come back, and I have no idea where the rest of this podcast is going to go. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mark. That was beautiful. And I hope everyone's listening at home. I've done this work before, and you can come on this journey. You can listen through this, and it's remarkable. And that was the big realization for me, was that the one person who has never abandoned me is me. I've always, in a strange way, kept showing up. And there was times where, just like you described, I was a little bit, felt like I was running away from myself, but I just kept on showing up. And that was an incredible healing moment for me when I realized that.
Yeah. I don't want to get too intellectual, but I'm just curious, what's the difference between intention and purpose?
So I feel like a purpose is what your soul is put onto in this earth. It's your contribution, your gift. Intention is, how do we connect a series of moments? I believe life is a series of moments, and everything is in the now. We get the mental construct is that there's a future and the past, but where is it? It all happens in the now. And the intention is, how do you actually bring that purpose into each moment of your life? That's how I like to think of it.
Yeah, can you give some examples of that? Because you're doing very well connecting the dots, and I think my listeners are going to want to hear more about what you just said. So can you go a little deeper with that?
So there's a principle of intentionality. I have 7 principles, and one is to experience peace and joy by learning to choose love over fear. So as a moment occurs, I have this moment, I drop into the present moment, and I, as a decision's occurring, I go, okay, my intention is I want to make more decisions out of love versus fear. So I ground myself and go, is this bringing me towards love or is it bringing me towards fear? And in that moment, it makes decisions very easily because it's a heart center place. It's an intuitive knowing. And I ask my body that and it will tell me, and it makes life very easy once you start doing that, because you're not in your head, you're not in the intellect, worrying, strategizing, calculating, which I've done so many times in my life. That's how I survived, was using my intellect, but it wasn't thriving. I don't want to survive anymore. I want to thrive. And we thrive through making decisions from that place, which is really wonderful. So I'm always like, and personal example is, would I be in this moment, someone asks me to do something and I might have a natural resistance, but then I get back to it and it's like, well, how can I bring my light to someone else? How can I give them my full attention and also follow through with my intention? And then that just suddenly gets me into a state where I don't feel resistance. I just become one with life. I come flowing almost with universal flow.
I think there is, as I'm tracking with you, and I think of fear and love, where I go to is there needs to be, and I'm speaking for myself, there needs to be a middle ground where I feel safe to make the transition. Because part of the fear, as I'm feeling the fear, is that I'll fall through the cracks, that I need to feel safe to leave the fear, which I don't like, but it's familiar, and go into the unfamiliar, which is the love. So can you track with that? And if so, can you elaborate on it? Or what do you think?
I can. So I like to bring in the ego here, because what you said is the familiar. And the familiar is where the ego likes to play with. Its sole role is to keep you alive. Now, keeping alive doesn't mean that you're actually living. It doesn't mean that you're thriving. It doesn't mean that you're enjoying life. It's just purely that you're alive. And in some regards, we've got to have a lot of love for the ego. If we didn't have the ego, we probably wouldn't be alive. We would have done probably some stupid things which would have jeopardized our life. But in that moment, we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, the ego is keeping us alive, but are we really, really living? And we need to break free of the familiar to get into the unfamiliar, because that's where life is occurring. And a few ways you can do that to create that safety is one, reminding yourself that you're always there and you always show up and you always find a way to get through. Another way is, which I really recommend doing, is asking people around you to help remind you. So I just had a men's group on the weekend and we were sharing, there was 3 of us really dropping in and talking about our friendship. And I said, we don't have to have a mediocre or an average friendship. Like, we can be co-creators in this friendship and make it extraordinary and just be great together. Because what has happened in a lot of friendships before, both myself and these 2 other people, is that there was an expectation from us onto this other friend and it wasn't received back. So then we felt hurt and we felt unsafe. So I said, well, what's something that would help you in this moment to relieve that past trauma and really feel great in this relationship? And one thing that we discussed was just saying, you are safe and I'm not going anywhere. Just that reminder. And I shared with my friend, I was like, you can make mistakes. You can like, literally, you can do things really wrong with me. As long as you make an agreement right now that we're going to keep working on our friendship and we're going to create together. And I'm going to keep reminding you, you're safe and I'm not going anywhere, even when you do something to hurt me. And that was liberating. Now he feels safe to go into an area that he wouldn't have explored before. There's a sense of love and richness that can come from our friendship that he didn't even know was possible. He shared that he only thought this was possible in an intimate relationship. He didn't realize this could come from a friendship. And I was like, yeah, I can. This can be really, really wonderful. That's what friends can be for each other. So leaning on our friends, our peers to remind us of these things about ourselves can be really wonderful. And for me, is it hard for me to say you are safe and I'm not going anywhere? It's the easiest thing to do. It's act of love. I love being able to say that to my friend.
You know, when I think about what you're saying, I'm thinking that uh, there's something about declaring as opposed to explaining your intention. Because, you know, when you declare, you're making a commitment to it. It was the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't the explanation of independence. And it sounds like you're giving people the courage to take that step, because one thing about you is you're not hurtful. And so people can trust you to not hurt them.
Mm.
So can you resonate with any of this?
I appreciate that so much, Mark. I haven't put it in those exact words, but it is how I feel. So when we declare, we take ownership. It's a matter of fact. It's we are there. If we're explaining, we're in the intellect. We're justifying, we're rationalizing. And I can tell you, I've done that a lot in my life. I've done a lot of things where I'm like, I'll make it sound okay. Well, I'm doing this because of this and because of this. And it's like, well, is this really what I want? Is this what my soul needs right now? Declaration, I love that. It's like, yes, this is happening. And remember, everything that has ever been created has been created right now. So we don't need to think in the future. We just need to feel it and embody it right now. And that's the difference between explaining. Explaining is thinking, we're up here, but declaring is owning and feeling it. And when we feel something, and this is, I'm a student of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he shares about like the brain can't and the body can't tell the difference between you visualizing experience and fully feeling it to actually doing it, because that's where it happens. So I love that, and I definitely connect with it.
Yeah, now say more about what you just said from Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, so it's this idea that when we can connect with a visualization and we feel like it's actually happening to us, that is how we actually create. That's how we manifest. And it was really interesting. I learned that in a place that you probably wouldn't think you would learn this. I learned it. I was trained as a pilot in the army in Australia. I was an army officer. And when we got taught to fly, you'd think maybe you'd get taught in a plane or a simulator. Where we actually did most of our work was with a broom between our legs, sitting in our bedroom, and we would sit there and we'd go through visualizing all the experiences, taking off all the checks, and it would just be all rote memory with our fingers and our body. So then when we actually hopped in a plane, we just did it. It was quite remarkable because our body had felt like it was already flying. It trusted that I was a pilot. So that first time, I'll never forget it. The first time I went and flew, I was like, are they really giving me the hands of this plane? Like, is this really going to happen? And it just sort of went in autopilot. So if the military are doing this, why isn't the everyday person? We see this in sports people as well. They visualize the experience. So then when they're actually out there, they're just playing the rehearsal that they've already done. So we can do that as humans to create whatever we want to manifest into our life, whatever we want to attract. Now, the key thing though is, and this is where a lot of people went wrong with the law of attraction, is that it's not good enough to just do it once and visualize it. You need to now then take the action to bring it towards you, to draw this into you. And what happens is there's a trust element. We've had this, you might have an hour visualization experience, you're feeling great, and then you get back into your familiar life and something occurs and you go, oh, see, I'm a failure. This isn't possible. My visualization isn't true. And at that moment, you have done something to your visualization. You've just broken the energetic connection to it. And now you aren't able to draw it to you. But in that moment, if you change that and you go, that's okay, I know I'm drawing this to me, you take the action, what you need to do, and then you stay in this beautiful flow with the divine or the quantum field, and you start bringing it towards you. And that's the really important bit, is that trust that it has happened because you created it in this present moment.
So I'm going to give you a bit of a challenge because I think you'll be able to handle it. I can imagine that when you're speaking to audiences, that there are people in the audience who just feel your positive energy, but they say to themselves, well, that'll work for you because you have courage. That'll work for you because when you had that wake-up call, you woke up and you had intention. And that'll work for you because you're up there speaking where I would never have the courage to do that. So, and if I'm in the audience, I think what I want to hear is, where do you in your journey still need to get even better? So what are some of the things as you take a breath and say, well, you know, Mark, I see the road to have it all together, but if the world thinks I'm all together and unapproachable, they don't really know me.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you continuing to strive to get even better?
So challenge accepted. And what you shared is something that happens to me quite a lot. And I always, that's why I bring so many personal stories into the experience, because I am far from got this right. Why I'm so committed to sharing this is because it's things that I'm discovering that are really working for me, and I've seen it work with others. And I just, by me teaching it and sharing it, it helps me embody it more myself. I think that's something, I'm a qualified teacher, and a lot of people don't realize that. They think you need to have it all right to teach. And I went, no, one of the greatest ways to learn is to actually teach. So you're correct there. So for me, a big thing which I notice myself is I get into this place sometimes where I don't fully trust myself. And what I'm really working on in life is this concept of Wu Wei. It's a Taoist concept, which is the idea of doing without force. It's chopping wood with the grain. And when I'm at my best is when I do less, when I don't actually force it, when I just trust myself and I connect with the divine and connect with my own love, and I just, things happen for me. Whenever I see myself working too hard, it's a real sign that I've lost connection with myself. I'm doing work in the 3D world, very matter to matter, and I'm not focused on energy. And that's a very big sign. And I just literally came out of a 2-year cycle where I was doing that in this one area with this business. I just kept working harder because I was trying to get it back to where it was. And all I was doing was just causing more problems. And then I had to surrender, and now I've sold it, which is a great relief. And I went, that's something which is ingrained in me quite strongly. I've created that pattern and I need to let that go. So that's definitely a very, very strong area in my life. Other areas would be,
Are you game to do another visualization? I don't do this all the time, but you know,
yeah,
are you game?
I'm always game. This is your show.
Yeah, but you're the guest. And anyway, it is what it is. I'd like you to imagine that you're speaking to an audience, and suddenly the audience is completely filled with you as a 10-year-old. And they're looking up at you. And it's your 10-year-old, except there's 200 of them. And they're collectively saying, we can't make it to you. You have to come to us. And I'm going to imagine this. Tell me if you can feel this. And if I'm you as the speaker and I'm seeing an audience of hundreds of me as a 10-year-old, I'm imagining that I would smile as the speaker tentatively. and they're looking up at you and they're saying, why are you nervous? And I want you to imagine that you look at all of them and you say, because I just see so much pain. I just see so much pain. And I want you to imagine that audience of 10-year-olds saying, I think if you come to us, you'll be safe. I think if you come to us, we can all walk out of it. But you got to come to us because we're you at 10. And I want you to imagine you as this adult-driven person who has all this attention, wanting to feel what that audience of you as a 10-year-old is saying to you. And here's the irony, because this is a different visualization than the one we did earlier. And they're saying, you have to come to us. And you just see all their pain. And now it reverses, and you look at all the 10-year-old yous as a speaker, and you say, do you promise I'll be safe? And they look at you as this high achiever, and they say, you're going to be safe. We're all going to be good. And I want you to imagine that you step down from the podium and you step into the group of 10-year-old yous. And I want you to imagine that this is enabling you to let go of that driven high achiever part of you that got you to build and fortunately sell business or businesses, but which never brought you peace. And I want you to imagine that as you let go of control of being the speaker and you step into the audience of you, that you start to feel more and more peace. Can you picture any of that?
Yeah, I can.
So what comes to mind? So you can open your eyes. And could you track with that?
Yeah, I could. It was confronting at the start, seeing 200 of my little self, and then I could see it, and I was really feeling this state that, like, you're enough, and we are enough. That was a big thing that I kept coming, is that, like, we're enough just in our own energy, just that we put out. We don't need to do anything else, and it's great that we do, but you're enough. That's what I just kept getting.
Yeah. So can you take this whole in and feel some calmness? Because as you started out, I didn't know that this was going to be a peacemaking session, but it's turned into it a little bit. But can you feel it more calmness to you?
Yeah, it's wonderful. And that's what I share, that I've been doing so much work to get to that place. And it's just nice when you just keep leaning into it. I really feel like it's a core desire for human beings. And it's our rationalizing and our response to trauma, or playing a victim, or thinking we're not enough, which doesn't allow us just to relish in life, in us, which is just beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. So what I would like you to do is imagine that audience of 10-year-old yous, and that whenever you're starting to race, that they call out to you and they say, hey, and you're busy, you say, hey, and they get your attention. And I want you to imagine them all looking at you and saying, Finn, you're already enough. You're already enough. Take it in, feel it, and then decide what you want to do so that you can hit the ground walking instead of hitting the ground running.
It's very grounding.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Where do you want to take the rest of this podcast? We have a few more minutes, or we can tell people where they can find out more about you.
It's interesting. I want to continue with that idea, what we were talking about before, where people will be like, that's too hard for me, or that's easy for you. And what I talk about is that this life of intentionality, it's not as far away as what you think it is. If you just take one little thing that we've shared today, or you just take one moment today where you set an intention and you act consciously rather than unconsciously, you're already on the path of intentionality. That's all it takes, is just to do one unfamiliar act, bring something unconscious to the conscious, and we're working through it. And then before you know, you put another foot in front of the other, and then you start building confidence. I think sometimes we get so focused on the destination, and we compare ourselves to what we want to be or what we're not. And that can seem too challenging, too confronting. But we don't have to get there now. Very similar to what you just shared with me. We don't have to rush. Let's just do one thing today. That's really how I navigated where I was feeling very depressed, very lost in my life. That wake up call 4 years ago, I literally had a piece of paper which had 16 different things on it. And I identified that if I did 5 of those things a day, I would want to wake up the next day. And if I did 10, I would feel okay. And I literally would just look at this piece of paper and go, what's the least resistance? What's the easiest thing? One of them was sit out in the sun for 20 minutes. Another one was go for a walk. Another one was call someone who's kind, just little things. And I'd look at it and I'm like, no, too hard, too hard, too hard. And then I'd be like, I think I can do that. Yeah, I know I can do that. And then I'd go sit in the sun. And then that would give me some courage to go do the next thing. And just those little acts, I truly contribute that piece of paper to saving my life. And that's all it took, is just break it down to such simplicity. We don't have to get there. The magic is in the journey. And that's really what I want to share with people and encourage people. I've seen people transform by tiny little acts. Don't worry about where we're going. Just focus on what we can do right now.
So if you're listening into this, maybe you'll pick up that this episode has really had sort of a kind of an arc of its own. And Finn feels different to me than from the beginning. And if you're my listener, maybe you'll pick up what I'm about to say. At the beginning, Finn has a lot of energy, a lot of intention, and he can be quite convincing in his tone. And what he openly shared with all of us is, sometimes I can be very convincing, but you're right, Mark. Sometimes the audience looks at me and they smile, that'll work for you, but it won't work for me. But what he's switched over to is how what he's discovered has helped him begin to heal from depression. So as he shifted over into talking more about how he has used what he has learned to begin to heal, and you can feel him not being convincing, but going to love, as he said, and sharing and talking with me and talking with all of you who are listening in. I hope you two can see how this episode has shifted from that convincing, pump you up, it'll work for you, to he's really loving you. Same way he loved that audience of 10-year-old Finns, and how he's talking with me and he's talking with you. And I hope you can then take it in so that you can go from, it'll never work for me, it'll only work for him, that what your takeaway will be, it'll work for all of us. So I hope you pick that up, because I certainly picked that up. So Finn, where can people find out more about you?
Right, thank you. So the best way would be, I've created a link for you. So it's on finniankelly.com, which is my website, /podcast. And there's some great free tools there, which will just help you go on this journey. And then you'll be able to access everything about me as well, which I really, really appreciate. I love connection. Like what you just shared, Marco, like I genuinely just love you. Like I just love humans, because it's when I love you, I love myself, because we are that level of connection. So don't feel like I'm out of reach. Like I'm here and I'm the same as you, and I'd love to hear from you.
And he would, if you're listening in. And if you're listening in, thanks again to listening to another episode of My Wakeup Call. This episode certainly woke me up, not only took us back to a younger Finn, it took me back to a younger me, and I hope it took you back to a younger you and helped you heal some things so that you can walk into your future or your present with a great intention. So until next time, thanks for tuning in to another episode of My Wake Up Call. Please share it with other people. It helps if you give us some reviews at Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you again or talk to you again. And until then, take good care.